Executives and customers in this case are a lot the same, right? They're distant from the problem, but they want to know about the outcome that impacts them. And so there aren't huge differences in some ways in those interactions. All right. So, hey, it's Ethan Evans. I'm here with my friend Awesome Dave, our producer. We have the production laptop up here so that he can multitask. So we're talking tonight about the path to becoming an executive, or if you have absolutely no interest in being an executive, how the heck to work with us unique unicorn beasts. And one of the things we do is we make them multitask. So now Dave has to be producer and guest.
And yeah.
Huh. So part of what he's going to help me talk about is we both come from technical backgrounds. We actually met going to school at Carnegie Mellon. But Dave stayed more on the technical side. I went more the general manager side through our careers. So we can tag team a little bit. Dave's presence here means my disclaimer is longer than usual. Not only do I not represent Amazon or Twitch when I speak here, but Dave, who is currently vice president at Discovery of Motor Trend, isn't representing Discovery or Motor Trend, unless you are.
No, not representing Motor Trend or Discovery.
So he's back enjoying being a gearhead.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, absolutely. I grew up with a gearhead as a dad and spent a lot of time under a hood, and now I'm helping put the videos up online. So that's a large part of what I'm doing today.
And I spent no time under a hood, to be honest. That like, I don't know. Well, see, I grew up on a farm though, where I could fix I can fix nothing.
Okay.
I can rig anything.
Oh, sure. Well,
with duct tape and baling wire.
But that's the thing. That's a large part of what my dad taught me was you fix something on a farm, it's a temporary fix that'll last maybe 10 years. So that was a large part of what he would do. Let's bring it out.
Temporary.
Well, I grew up not on a farm. I grew up in the suburbs, but I spent a lot of time on the farm, and they would give an arc welder to a 10-year-old so you could go put things together. It's like, hey, I'm sure that'll be fine.
Yeah. So Nolan Murphy, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Of course, we love Twitch Prime here. And the drink, I put it in our mixology channel on Discord, but if you don't follow our Discord, the drink of the day, which by the way, all the subs have the drink of the day chat icon now, is the Sinful Apple. So the Sinful Apple is cinnamon whiskey, vanilla vodka, apple cider, and lime juice. So made by our faithful crew of mixologists, all of whom are here in the studio tonight. Before we got on air, Dave and I were just talking about live studio audiences. He thinks the studio will be ready to open in April.
In April, yeah.
And so for those of you in our Discord, maybe in general chat or somewhere, you can talk about if you're local or have plans to visit Seattle, coming by and giving us a bigger studio audience, which we think would be a lot of fun. So, RTK and Co., thank you for the sub, the continued long time sub, and I'm glad you're here. So let's jump right in. Dave and I did a little prep for this. We spent the weekend together. Our families hang out together a lot, and between ski runs, which is what we normally do in the winter, we were talking about all the things that go into an executive role. So since I have a tendency to hog the invisible microphones, why don't you give your perspective first on executive leadership?
Sure.
And I have an umbrella.
He has an umbrella. We made sure to get him an umbrella.
They bought a whole case. We have a lot. There will always be an umbrella going forward.
Perfect.
At least here.
No, a lot of what I see as an executive is making decisions based on information that may not be completely there. That's a large part of being decisive and driving that for the organization. A lot of times, as you've said, I think in the past, Ethan, people come with all sorts of information and possible problems. And what am I going to do about this? It's great when they come with solutions, but sometimes we need to decide between one or another. And it's making that decision that helps the team start moving forward. So as we talked a little on the lift earlier, it's about getting that focus, giving the focus not only to the team, but also to your stakeholders and your upper executive. So everybody has a boss. Even if you're the CEO, you've got the board or somebody else. But often as a VP of technology,
The ultimate boss is the payroll.
that is the ultimate
Because we
boss.
have Hephaestus
Absolutely.
here. He runs his own company. He might not think he has a boss, but he'd be the first to say making payroll is a boss.
That is absolutely a boss.
And yeah, Pashi, making calculated risk. Customers are your boss. That's super
Customers,
true. That's even
absolutely.
better.
So I mean that's part of guiding those decisions. It's learning the values of the company and understanding those and leveraging those to make the decisions that you need to move things forward.
So before we go on, one of the things I would say we should share, and by the way, please use our extension and start putting in questions. We kind of have a new tradition going here where I answer, and this time I'll have Dave tag teaming with me.
Sure.
I answer all the questions that end up in the question widget if possible. We answer the highly voted ones in depth first, and there's instructions in chat on how to vote and how to enter questions, which we want you to do. And you can ask us anything about the executive experience, how we got started, etc. So we'll do a little more preamble about it. I'll do the rant because I have the rant prepared, and then we'll answer questions. But as framing, I don't think anyone as starts off with the idea that they're going to become an executive. Like in grade school or even high school, some people want to be entrepreneurs,
Sure.
which implies executive leadership.
Yes.
But in the traditional, like doctor, fireman, soldier,
No.
NBA star, it doesn't make the list.
No, I would say that's definitely not the case. You don't wake up one day and say, I think I'll be a corporate executive.
So then, as we talk about the path to corporate executive, how do people end up there? What's your opinion of how people end up in our roles?
I think a large part is how well you do at assessing risk and making those decisions. As you start to, people recognize that you've got skills in doing that, in making an informed decision, and also bringing calm to chaos. A lot of that, I believe, is part of what I've seen, at least. Like you have a completely chaotic situation. I'm more on the tech side in terms of deep tech, and things are going haywire. And if you're able to walk in and bring the team around and start just organizing and executing on things, that's that calming, that assessing, and then taking risks. It leads to people recognizing that you have that ability, and that's a large part of what moves you into that executive role.
Yeah, I think that's true. Part of becoming an executive, honestly, is wanting it. So
True.
I've done shows before on the path to becoming a manager. And so for obviously you don't become an executive usually without first being a manager. So I don't want to revisit all of that. But the becoming, and someone here in chat says I sound like someone that apparently I'm clueless. It's either a typo or I don't know. So if that's possible, Eben Pagan.
Huh.
Clue me in, Harris. You'll have to educate me. Maybe it's a boomer moment. I don't know. Anyway, becoming an executive requires that you want to do some of the things on that path. And I think people discover that in their career. Mm-hmm. Because if you're really planning on leading, most people start in leadership. They think they're going to found a company or get a couple years of experience and found a startup. They're going to build their own business. Right. Maybe they're taking over a parental business owned in a family. And they end up in leadership that way. But otherwise, I see people discovering it on the way. You want to say more about any of that?
I agree. I think that you end up, you want it and you start taking on like, boy, I really want to get this done. And you start taking on more responsibility, more teams, and you start leading other leaders. I think that's one of the biggest steps I would say as we walk through how we both got here. But you start you want it, you want to have more of an influence on the organization, and your organization it gets bigger or smaller over time, but it's that impact that you're having and that you're enjoying having.
Yeah, I think the enjoyment is part of it, and it also is easy scorekeeping. In other words, I would say honestly, not every executive, not every manager, but a lot of people are driven in their careers, and you can scorekeep. How many projects are you running? How many people end up being in your organization? Not that we encourage empire building, like accumulating people just for the sake of people, but as you have more impact, I've talked before about the magic loop, how any manager will be thinking about who can I give more on my team. And so most of my career growth, and I think a lot of Dave's, were managers above us who were desperate for help, giving us more to do because it took something off their plate. And if we handled it well, it kept coming. I do want to say thank you for all the people who are putting in questions. This is great. We'll go to those soon, because if we have a good question list, there's nothing more fun. I also see Liger boxes here. I don't know if your question's been swapped over yet. Do people who start a company and work themselves up, or executives always job jumpers? Well, I can talk about that some. If you can, or somebody else, transfer it into our question list, because I'd love to address that. I do want to say I won't give away too many details. Liger is one of our longtime followers. He's a sub here. Yeah. And he's an interesting guy. I won't go into the details, but he's on the front lines of dealing with COVID-19 or coronavirus cases.
Oh,
so he's in the medical trenches, and I'm super pleased.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
that's important, scary duty. Because obviously seems like a pretty dangerous, unpredictable disease that he's helping clean up. So yeah, literally saving the world. So see, we
literally saving the world. Yeah.
Yeah, we have. Well, that's the thing. One place. A lot of you know that I stream with Devin Nash, and Devin sometimes teases his chat about being eggplants. We should put thank you for that suggestion. Maybe we'll do that in the future. Start putting the guest name in the stream title. Yeah, that is a good suggestion.
Yeah. And I like the bang guest. We don't have that in our chat bot, which is sitting right here. I could add it, but thank you.
But those are good suggestions. Much appreciated. So to the point, though, I don't believe that most of Twitch chat, particularly in our channel, are at all eggplants. We have a lot of professionals here, a lot of very accomplished people. We have doctors, lawyers, product managers, all kinds of specialists. We also have a lot of students, and they will be the future leaders, which is the point. So we'll talk about technical path in just a minute, but a short list of stuff. In trying to prepare this show, we can talk about the path to becoming an executive. We can't really teach it in an hour or even a day, because I realize it pulls together a lot of the things we talk about in this channel. You have to be able to lead people. You have to be able to assess and take risks. You have to make decisions, which is part of taking risk. You have to fight for resources, budget, all of that different stuff. That's interesting. Is it because you started the chat bot? Yeah, you don't have uptime implemented? Uptime is only on the other setup, is why uptime's not working. We've been up about 20 minutes. So, and then you talked about filtering information up and down. So why don't you talk a minute about that, and then I'll go into
sure. No, absolutely. I think managers do it at all levels. I think executives have to be exceptional at it in terms of the quantity of information that comes in. So there's a lot of noise that goes in, especially in a technical org, as far as what it takes to make whatever product you're building. And you'll get a lot of feedback from engineers and QA, and you've got to filter it together into information that's meaningful, especially when something goes wrong, to your senior executives and partners. They don't necessarily want or need to know all the details of, sometimes referred to as sausage making, or just the the complexities that are there. That's that's upward filtering. Downward, you may also have a lot of information, a lot of discussion about things the company could do, the things that we might go and do, and there's a lot of new ideas. It's like, you might have somebody who comes in every morning with a brand new idea and excited executive, person that you're working with, or maybe even your CEO who walks in the morning and says, "Hey, I've got this new great idea." Sometimes you need to filter those before they get to the team and disrupt or cause churn to the rest of the team. So you do a lot of decisions on what you should and should not bring to the team and to the executives. And you have to be really astute about that, because if you're not providing enough information, then people feel like they're in the dark. But if you're providing too much, it just overloads in both directions.
Yeah, too much up and the boss tunes it out because he has to. He turns up his filter. Too little and he worries.
Yes, what's going on?
Too much down and people feel churn. Too little and they feel not informed.
Exactly.
This is a good rule. No matter what you do as an executive, not everyone will be happy with you all the time.
Absolutely.
Like that. No. If that's important to you, to be liked by everyone in your job, not so much.
You've talked about that before. How much discomfort can you take?
Yeah,
that whole laying down in the mall.
The Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week. Can you lay down in the middle of the mall and have people stare at you as they walk by? Yeah, sounds like streaming. Well, it's a lot like life. Anytime you interact with enough people, some of them are going to dislike you or just find you not to their taste. So the thing I wanted to say that I had forgotten is when we talk about taking risk, one of the things that's really important if you're going to be a good executive leader is you have to be good at taking blame.
Yes.
Because when everybody loves risks that work out, right? If you go to the gambling table and you bet on black because James Bond told us always bet on black, and you win, everybody feels great, and then you shoot a couple of spies and get in your hover jet. But when the risk goes poorly, you have to take responsibility. And so if it's not comfortable to need to stand up and be in front when your team has failed, that's not a good executive role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I say your team has failed, I simply mean the result was bad. Not that anyone necessarily did anything bad, but sometimes gambles don't work out. Say more.
Sometimes things don't work out. I think it's very critical that you really do take responsibility and not kind of half take it. I've seen yes, my team, we messed up. And by the way, it was Joe over here who did something wrong.
And I'm talking to him about it.
And I'll go talk to Joe about it. And it's like, that's pretty transparent to the team, but it's one of these things that, it's often referred to, at least in groups that I'm with, it's, you do need to provide your team cover fire. You need to be able to take responsibility and own what went on with the team. And yes, afterwards, you will be having some conversations with people about what went wrong. How do we make sure we don't do this again? But I find, the teams really respond to, that's another section is trust, in terms of just the amount of trust you have to build by taking that, and driving with the team is incredible.
Yeah, and I would say for everyone watching, and thank you. I see some new people I haven't known, like German G. Suarez here making a comment. We love people in chat to add to the discussion, because even though Dave and I both do this, I don't think we know everything about the topic.
Nope.
One of the stories I wanted to tell was something that happened pretty recently. I was at work, and the point here is how carefully your team is watching you. And I had no idea, like I always knew this, like, oh, my team watches me. They watch my behavior. And so to this point that Pashi made, that if you put someone on the spot, your team will notice and then they won't take risk again. Yes. Because if they see you throw someone under the bus, they'll know. And if they see you stand up for someone, they'll also know. Well, the funny version of this story I tell, and this just happened a few weeks ago, is in my building, we have a bunch of elevators that bring you down to the ground floor, and then you have to walk a little distance, and there's another elevator that takes you to the garage. And I've talked on stream before, I normally ride the train to work. But on this particular day, I needed to drive in. And one of my employees saw me when I got off the elevator on my team. And it's a big team. And he's a relatively new hire, I think probably new out of college or not very far in his career in terms of time. And he saw me riding down the escalator to go to this other elevator. And he said, "Oh, are you going to the garage? Yeah. I've got to see what kind of car the VP drives." And I thought, that's a little strange. Like, but okay, whatever. And so I'm walking along, and he's following me into the elevator, down to the floor I'm on, and out into the garage. And I tell him, like, "Hey, I drive an old Jeep. You're going to be disappointed." And it's the kind of thing that, like, would be slightly creepy in a way. But it wasn't, no big deal. He comes with me. He finally sees I really do drive a 2006 Jeep. It's got about 170,000 miles on it. And I love it. I love old cars because to me, then, if they get a scratch or a dent, no big deal. But he gets up to the car and he's like, "Wow, you really drive a Jeep." And so I can't, I'm a straight liner. I love straight lines, and I am a wise ass. And it was raining that day because it's Seattle. And I said, "You know what? I drove the Jeep today because I didn't want to get the Bugatti wet." And his eyes get really big. And he's like, "You have a Bugatti?" I'm like, "No, I only have a Jeep." But it was perfect. The point being, though, people study in leadership, never forget how much people are watching your behavior. And that story will stick with me for as long as I do this, because you think leaders sometimes think that their behavior isn't being studied. And if you want to be a good leader and you want to be an executive, just know your team's always watching you. And whatever you do, they will know. So with that, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what's different about being a technical executive. Because when we first put this on the streaming schedule, we said path to tech executive. And it is an excellent drink. Thank you, Guru22.
Yeah, I would say the technical executive, the addition there is being able to explain very complicated technical problems to people who are on the business side, who don't necessarily understand all the details of the tech. And you can't make it too high level, or they'll feel like you're speaking down to them. But if you give them just the right amount of information, dig a little bit deeper, but provide enough to understand. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for a technical executive, and also being able to go very deep with your team. So I would say, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, but any executive should know at least to some level the roles of the people that are working for them. But you get to a point where you don't know them all. Whereas with a technical leader, you end up with most people are doing something in the tech, and you should be able to understand, like, a high-level system design. How do things plug together? Where are the weak points in the system? And being able to communicate that to my CEO, for example, is one of the things that I think is a skill that you absolutely need as a technical executive. And I'll wait until you took a big sip.
That's okay. I think you're absolutely right. Tech executives have to maintain credibility both up and down the food chain, because nobody wants the Dilbert boss who can't understand anything about what's being done, nor do the employees respect that, or do the leaders trust it. Now, I've seen many executives who are successful leading tech without being technical, but they are very good at asking the right questions. Sean123 says Geek to English is a very important language to learn. I would actually argue that the majority of my career success, a big piece of it has been my ability to translate geek to English and English to geek. Both ways, actually. Super important. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I've seen it personally, but it's the asking the right questions, Ethan. Because part of the translating, not just from like the CEO, but you have product people who want to build something and translating their ideas into something that means something to your technical team. They may have a completely different picture of what it is. So it's what am I saying?
Oh, I'm laughing because somebody said ancient geek. There's ancient Greek. There's ancient geek.
Oh, and we got
That's
two of
COBOL.
them. We got two of them right here.
Let's go. I never wrote COBOL. I probably could do some Fortran.
Yeah, I did COBOL. I was a summertime job. I don't want to go too long, but it was I learned COBOL in about a week. And then I figured out that you could create a game.
Common business-oriented language. I at least know the acronym.
Yes.
Wow, that one's like archaeology.
Yep.
Hey, let's tell all these people what the year 2000 bug was.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if anybody. Yeah, people don't know. Yeah, they know about that. But it's like, there was so much nonsense there. But
just like people now are worried about coronavirus. I've told this story before. I'll tell it really quick because it resembles the coronavirus stuff in a way. Of course, I know that you're not 12. I'm joking, Guru 22. We're having fun. And by the way, there are some people who watch the stream who were not around or are too young to remember Y2K. But very briefly, I gave a talk. One of the first public talks I ever did as a young technical leader was to a gathering about why Y2K wasn't going to be a huge problem. And afterwards, these two ladies came up to me and they lived in an apartment, but they were very worried that basically the supply chain of the world was going to break down around Y2K. And they wanted to know what I thought, because they were in an apartment, if they stockpiled gasoline by putting a 55-gallon drum of gasoline on their deck, on the deck of their apartment. And I told him I didn't think that was necessary, nor really a great idea.
No, not unless you want to defend against invaders.
Tip that over.
Anyways, no, bad idea. Don't put a 55-gallon drum of gasoline anywhere but way away from people. And 2038. I pointed that out. Guru 22. Absolutely will be an interesting. I think
that's where the Unix clock.
That's where the Unix clock runs out.
The Unix clock runs out. That will be interesting.
I wonder what'll actually happen then. There will be some system somewhere.
I remember at Y2K we calculate like that came up that it was 2038. Seemed a long way away then.
Yeah, it was
feeling old.
Well. Now we've gone to longs and double longs, and now I'm getting into geek speak. So yeah,
that's okay.
We're good.
So we're gonna hit questions next, but before I do that, I want to hit the rant, and I always stand up for the rant because it's appropriate. Got to pound the table or pound the air. Look, one of the things that's tough as an executive, it's the other side actually of the guy following me to check out my car. People are afraid of us. And it turns out we're not usually trying to be mean, but we seem mean, we seem intimidating. There's this myth that, because I'm sure it happened somewhere once, where you say the wrong thing and the person's gonna be like, "That's really dumb. Why don't you go pack your desk and don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out?" But this doesn't really happen in the real world. And the result is, some people, I get the question a lot when I talk. People are very afraid to approach executives and they wonder, like, how can I have a conversation with this person? Turns out what you do is you open your mouth, you talk, you try to say something intelligent, you go from there. It's not any different than talking to anyone else, other than you may need to see when you can get time or be respectful of time. And so, somebody in chat says, right, German says, come with a solution to a problem. Maybe if you want to bring something up, it is a good idea not to just complain. We do have a lot of people, or some people, who only talk to us when they want to complain and they have no solutions. One of the things one of my bosses said that I think is really interesting is he said an idea is worth 1 point. And he had a 10-point scale. And what he meant was bringing me an idea like, hey, Ethan, here's a good idea for our team. You should do that, Ethan, is nice. It's worth 1 point. But actually, like, having a plan, having a budget, being able to say how you would do that idea, doing some of the work for it, or volunteering to help. Those are all worth extra points. And he used to say an idea is worth 1 point. There's 9 more on the board. So if you want to talk to an executive, we actually love to talk to people and get information and get ideas and encourage strong performers, help you understand how to be a stronger performer, because that's good for us. It's not just we like it, it's selfishly good. If we can help you understand the work and do better work, then we look better. It's real simple, and we're good at being selfish like everyone else. So, okay. So in conclusion, I know you want to talk about this too. Did you want to say anything about talking to executives?
I think talking or communicating, just even written, keep it short and concise and make your points. Like, I don't know, if somebody comes in and just rambles in my office, you start to drown out. It's just that's not respectful for them in terms of going to an executive. They really do. We want to help. We want to make sure the problem gets solved. But if you just ramble and rant, that's a great thing to go do out with a friend, having a beverage somewhere, but not walking into an executive office. And I would say if you're mailing someone, some executives like this guy actually read these long emails, but for the most part, keep it simple. Like, bring it down to a short thing.
Somebody here says TLDR, right?
Yeah.
Or elevator pitch.
Absolutely.
Those are both right.
Absolutely. No, and I mean, if I could say one story on the tech side,
Please.
would be when something does go wrong. An example would be a long time ago, certain number of sites went down, and the team is scrambling. They're trying to figure out, thousands of customers are impacted. Now it's hundreds of thousands of customers. They can't get to system XYZ. I won't go even to what company. I'm getting all this detail, but what I sent to my executives at the time, I think it might have been you, but it's like,
probably
you
me.
send a very short email. We've got a system problem. There are X number of customers impacted. We believe we have the underlying. I'll give you an update in 30 minutes or 10 minutes. Very clear guidance as far as, like, there's a problem. Customers are impacted. I've got this, and I'm driving forward on it. Now, you may get some questions back from the executive, and you just answer them. But I can't tell you how many times I've gotten great feedback from CEOs, executives who are like, yeah, okay, Dave's got it.
Yep. And super critical point Dave made. You'll get your next update at this time will hold off an enormous amount of questions. In other words, if you say this thing's down or we're working on it, and you'll get your next update in an hour or in 30 minutes or at 1 o'clock, whatever it is, knowing when I'm going to hear more is magical, because it means I know how long I have to wait. And my decision now doesn't become, oh, do I have to get involved? It becomes, well, can I give them 45 minutes? Do I have 45 minutes worth of trust in me? Here's how many are affected. Yeah, allows the CEO to prioritize. Yeah. Literally the only sane. That's exactly right. Setting expectations for the next step. It's totally true. In many ways, Hephaestus, executives and customers in this case are a lot the same, right? They're distant from the problem, but they want to know about the outcome that impacts them. And so there aren't huge differences in some ways in those interactions. So what I would suggest, we like to involve chat. If some of you have not ever spoken or not recently spoken to your executive, whatever that is in your situation, and if you're in college, that can be your dean, that can be your professor. If you're in your first job, that may be a director or a senior manager. Think about what useful, positive interaction could you have with that person this week? And feel free to post it in chat or ask, is this a good idea to bring up? And again, I'm not actually talking about manufacturing something to talk about for no reason. Instead, what I'm saying is, what do you have locked in your brain that person might want to know, or what question has been burning away with you that would help you do your job or be successful that you have not taken the time to ask. And both of those things are very valid. Advice for solo building a software package. All right, literally, you'll probably get some help in chat or direction. We're going to take the first and most voted question in our list of questions in our extension. And that question is, what is the most difficult decision you've had to make as an executive leader? Dave, would you like to take this one first?
Sure, I'll take it first. I would say multiple times. I think the hardest decisions are, and these are, years ago, is what are you going to do with the organization? What is the right size of the organization and which direction are you going to take it in? To me, making those decisions are so impactful to the customer, to the company, and to the people that are on the team. Which way are you going to go?
Are you talking in part about layoff situations?
Yes.
Yeah,
layoff
those can be super hard.
It can be limiting to career growth if you're deciding like we're going to reorganize to a point where we need less managers. That ends up being a layoff situation, but it also perhaps limits career growth.
Yeah. I would absolutely say trying to resolve,
Ding dong.
Executing when things are going well is the easy case.
That's the easy case, yeah.
There's a couple of things I was talking to you about I wanted to mention. The first thing is when if you don't ever want to have to sit with a list of employees in front of you and decide who gets to keep their job and who's going to go on the unemployment rolls, don't seek executive leadership. Because if you do it long enough, that will probably be part of your job. Like that, the day will come where there's a so-called reduction in force or the company's not doing well, and you're going to have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And certainly sitting around picking who lives and who dies, so to speak. And it's a good place for me to say, not speaking for Twitch or Amazon at the moment, not
or
speaking for Motor Trend or Discover, is a lousy thing to have to do.
Yeah.
And hard. I've laid myself off. I've talked before about losing my job in a layoff. I was part of the decision and put my own name on the layoff list at a job. We were laying off a third of the company, and I could see that I was one of the third that could be done without. I
find those the hardest. I just think you have to disassociate from it, but you're making a decision that's having this impact on people's lives, and it's difficult. It's not like at least most people.
And there are legal constraints, there are ethical constraints, there are practical constraints. You get into questions like this person is more talented,
right,
but is more likely to be disgruntled after this, and so you're balancing like who's the best person versus who is most likely to stay.
Yeah.
Or be able to weather the resulting churn. Let me see what else I would say about this. So if we took it out of the range of a layoff, like I know you were a military leader, right?
Yeah.
You were a major in the National Guard. I don't know if you've had to make difficult decisions in that context.
Well, I would say that the most difficult decision I can imagine would be anything in combat. Now, I'm one of the rare National Guardsmen who never saw actual combat, but we trained for that. And you have to make these decisions. Like, that you're going to make this strategic move where there's going to be people that die. There's bullets involved. It's I kind of like the tech role that I have for the most part in most places because it's a calming influence to say, you know what? It's a website. Nobody's going to die. And
have you ever looked at Reddit? Wait.
Well, okay, maybe they might, but no. It's electron. Now, look, if I was building rockets where somebody was going up, then I'd have a higher degree of concern, or pacemakers, different level of software engineering.
Yeah, totally. And for the discussion that's going on here in chat, we have an Ask the Community channel in the Discord that was just posted. Join our Discord, and we can go into more depth there on like super specific questions. And there's other people. We have other PhD candidates who can help you with that. And I'm happy to as well. So Let's see. I think we've probably beaten that one to death. Well, I haven't answered what is my most difficult. There's two types of hard decisions. There's the ones you wrestle with that are strategic. And then there's the on-the-spot call when something's broken and you need to make a choice about how you're going to handle it. So I've talked a lot about those on-the-spot choices already where like I was speaking in public and the speech went poorly, or Bezos is looking at me. I think the strategic choices that are hard are the ones. Amazon has an idea of what's called a one-way door, where you're going to do something that's very hard to reverse.
That's a really good
And so once you launch a product, we very rarely take a product away from customers, and you may maintain that thing for years. There's a joke that says, going to the technical part, the software is the software is finished or whatever when the last user is dead.
Yeah. That's basically it. It'll live forever out there.
Right.
So it's I would say that's a great point. The one-way doors and how do you identify that something is or is not. Some are obvious. Launching a product that you know customers are going to use and take on, and then it's like, is it maintainable? Is it what we need? Is it something the company actually should be doing? Are some great questions to figure out, is that the right one-way door? Whereas, a lot of times some companies do betas and other things to test, but that's Amazon. You're right. We tend to not.
I would say the hardest decisions I've made are when to roll back a release.
Yes.
Like when to say, okay, we rolled this out, we screwed it up, pull it back. And I had to do that with Amazon Video, what's now Prime Video. I won't retell the whole story, but we launched it and it was broken and we had to pull it down for several days while we fixed it. It was actually down about 2 weeks. And that kind of rollback is just super egg on your face and the whole team's disappointed. We're going to go to this next question, though. It's a great question. How have you handled the time commitment that being an executive leader entails? I'll always go to my guest first.
No, it is one of the largest challenge, and I know that you've talked on this channel, but it's really being brutal about your own calendar, and it's when you do get some help. I mean, sometimes you see these things as a privilege when you have an executive assistant who can do a great job of defending your calendar, essentially trying to make sure that you're in the right meetings with the right people. And that's why it's so hard to get time with us sometimes. It's really difficult to find time because you've got people trying to.
Time is your limited resource.
Time is your limited resource. I mean, it's absolutely I would say, how have I handled it? A large part is just being brutal with my calendar. And that means not taking meetings that I would love to be at, might be very informative, but I have to go and take another meeting that's more urgent and more impactful.
I don't think it's, having known you in your career, there's another honest part about that. Working long hours.
Yes.
Working long hours.
Absolutely.
Sometimes doing substandard work, very painful. Sometimes compromising health. You don't want to do these things.
No.
But I have absolutely, I won't speak for Dave, but I've absolutely worked to where I was unhappy. I've told this story. You know this story. At my house, I have 3 jars of marbles. And this story's worth telling for a minute because I heard about it long ago. And I have a jar of marbles, white marbles, a jar of black marbles. And at the end of every weekend, I put a marble. I'll do it tonight when I go home. I put a marble in the middle jar, white if I spent my week well and I'm happy with basically my quality of life, and black if I'm not. And there was a period of my life when I was in my largest executive role and kind of operating beyond where I was good, where I was putting a lot of black marbles in that jar, and I had to figure out how to change that. And Steve Jobs has a quote about this, where he talked about if you have too many bad days in a row, change anything about your life to get out of it.
Yeah.
So when I saw myself putting in black marble after black marble week after week, I said to myself, I can't sustain this and it's not worth it. What am I going to do? And that leads you to all these actions. So I would say the real way I've handled the time commitment is by learning new skills and getting smarter. And I can tick off some of the skills. I always talk about this essay. It's in Harvard Business. It's an HBS or Harvard Business Review article called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time. I learned to manage energy, not time. I learned to hire better and delegate more. Someone said delegate a lot. And I learned to take on less, like to realize when I need to be efficient, when I need to not sign up for things, because I want to do everything. Hephaestus says there's a book I'm not familiar with called The Effective Executive. It's a good book that touches on minimizing meetings. Yeah, there's a bunch of tricks with meetings. I often send people an email that says, what's your agenda? Like, do we need to meet or can it be handled in email?
Yeah.
So we promoted several new mods to make sure we had good mod coverage. Let's see. Anyone want to watch Frontline's documentary on Bezos and Amazon? So you guys are free to discuss anything you saw there. I'm not going to talk about Bezos and Amazon, but, because that's not what we do here. But I realize he's a topic of interest. Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. Well, he's super well-respected author. Delegation, I feel, is the hardest part for people to learn going into management. Sure. Yeah. There's a book I read a lot. It's not on my book list, but I recommend sometimes called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's by an executive coach. And the point is, what gets you promoted is all the hard work you do yourself. But then you have to let go and let other people do that work. And you're used to having your own work be what makes you valued.
Right.
Do you want to add to this before we go on?
No, I think it might actually even be might move to the next question because I think it falls onto delegation. Like you've got
All right, let's go to the next one. You take that. Yeah. What skills / abilities / experience do executives notice in upcoming managers? Great question.
They're solving problems for me. You've talked about this. They're solving problems for me. If I can give something to somebody, they're going to get more work too. That's the one thing you have to watch when you end up handing everything to one person, but that's a sign that they're actually taking it and either they're accomplishing it or they're giving it to somebody else or getting their team to work on it, but they're getting stuff done for me. That's the number one thing I notice.
And Hephaestus talks about this, people who are proactive versus passive.
Absolutely.
Massive. The phrase I've heard for this, which at first it's one of those things that sounds illogical or counterintuitive, is if you want something done, give it to a busy person.
Yes, I love that.
And that sounds absurd.
It's so true.
Like, why would you do that? Give it to the person who's not busy. The reason they're not busy is they don't do anything. And so it turns out that giving work to a busy person will get it done faster than giving it to the idle person. The idle person, you need to give feedback.
Absolutely. No, I mean, if you find somebody who's busy, there's a good chance they're going to get it done. What we don't want to see is, and I don't want to see, is if I give it to somebody and then I have to follow up 10 times during the course of a week.
So there's a long list here, right? Yeah. You're touching on good communicator.
Good communicator.
If they're a good communicator, good at giving you status. Yeah. By the way, almost all executives, you can check with yours, almost all leaders would rather get an occasional ping that says, hey, there's nothing wrong. I just want to let you know it's going great. We're still on schedule for March 31st or whatever. They'd much rather hear that than only hear from you when there's trouble. The second, but good communicators is a huge issue or opportunity. Good judgment.
Good judgment.
Because we can't, if we're going to bring someone up in an upcoming manager, we're looking for people not who are right all the time, but for people who are right a lot. Because, like, I once had a manager, I certainly won't name names. Every time he suggested something, he was a technical leader, and every time he suggested something about the product, I learned to think, whatever he said, consider the complete opposite. Like, it just wasn't a strength. And I learned to think, whatever
he says, think the opposite.
Well, consider, like, if he says we should make this button black, consider white. And that isn't like a positive sign, right? It's not The audience here likes that.
It could be a
The
skill.
mixologists are happy.
I mean, that'd be a useful skill if it was absolutely guaranteed.
if it was 100%.
100%, do the opposite
Bet
of
on
whatever
black.
this person says.
Put it all on
Put
red.
it all on red. Go.
Thank you, Matchstick Man, for this sub. I love all the regulars here who are long-time members of the community. So the last thing I would say is people who own their mistakes.
Yes. Yeah.
Look, you broke it, clean it up. Somebody else broke it, but it's in your area. Tell me what you need and clean it up. Don't bring me a mess. People who own stuff. So we talk about extreme ownership all the time here. The book, read it. Read Jocko. It's a great read. Jocko Willink and Luke somebody or other. It'll come up here in books. But we like people who own things because when we give you something, and so that's what we look for in managers.
Yeah.
I
would say
anything
that's,
else?
Well, especially
Ability.
along those lines. Yeah, ability. But especially along those lines, don't ever hide anything. I think I had a general one time tell me, it was at one of these army things, but it was basically, Lieutenant Markley, bad news is not like wine. It does not get better with age. So I may have stumbled on it, but it doesn't get better with time. You know, it's basically, if it's broken, I want to know about it soon. Makes sense?
Yeah,
Like,
of course. If
like,
it's broken, I want to know right away. Liger, you're going to have to explain some more. Medical directors love doctors who are unlucky with their patients. That doesn't sound good.
wow.
That sounds terrible. I hope not. All right, we're going to move on.
That was why you had the shocked look. I was like,
Yeah, sometimes chat throws me.
It was like,
It varies between companies. Overall, someone who behaves. Yeah, values are super important as well.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll move on to the next question, and I love that you folks have put in so many questions and voted so much. What kind of people tend to be executive leaders? Personality traits.
I think. Which one do we
did I
pin,
skip
guys?
that one? Nope. I skipped one. How do you handle taking responsibility for mistakes made under your supervision?
We've kind of touched on this. You were just saying, like,
Yeah.
you look for people who do this, but you really do own it yourself. You have to basically say, look, my team, my organization, this went wrong. I'm going to go back and find out what happened, and you need to come back with a plan. Like, and again, I think it's great to be time bound. Like, we know what happened. We know now how we can prevent it, and we're going to fix it by this date. Here are our actions. This is a lot of times in tech, it's this root cause analysis. It's figuring out what we need to do and how to solve it. Now, you do go back to your team and find out what happened and what needs to be done. Ideally, in many organizations, this should not be a blame game. This is just finding out what happened. It's not because Joe did something. If it required a human to do it, then there's some mechanism that broke down. At least that's the way I look at things from a tech side of view. It's if there was a human that caused the problem, unless it was literally they went in and deleted things from the database or something like that, there's usually some mechanism. Well, in that example, how did they get access to the database? Why were they in there in the first place? So anyways, it's you do take responsibility to the executive that you're working with, and then you go back to the team to find out the details of what went wrong and how to fix it.
Yeah, so I want to tell a story here. That's why I stood up. What?
Rant 2?
No, maybe. So, wow, yeah, it might turn into a rant. But it's one I have to own. So, we made a decision in one of my teams a year ago to favor short-term productivity over long-term automation. And that was a decision we made for a certain circumstance. And it was a compromise. It's a trade-off. But I'm the owner, I allowed my team to then believe that we valued short-term more than long-term. The result of which is we got some software that was hacked up and made only for special cases in a very myopic, limited way. Where I had to own that is when I found out that this particular product was completely not scalable. A way to take responsibility for that was when I discovered the technical design sucked. I never asked. I purposely said, do not tell me which engineers worked on this. I don't want to know, because I don't want to have any taint, because ultimately it was our guidance as leaders, me and the people on my team.
Yeah.
It was us who set the environment. And so the way I took responsibility in that case is I set up the circumstances that led people to act in a way that then bit me. Well, if I go trying to find out who did that, I talk to my team leaders. I say, look, you need to talk to them and say, hey, that's not what we want. Please do it differently. But I don't even want to know. And the way you take responsibility for mistakes made under your supervision is, in the end, the captain is responsible for the ship and crew and gets to go down with the ship. And so it doesn't matter, you know, whether you look in the military does this a lot. Other places, though, the leader is responsible. And if you look at extreme ownership, this book we talk about a lot, it talks about there's always something more the leader could have done. And in that case, I set up the wrong circumstances. And so, as the bird abides here says in chat, you have to set up a culture where it's about the problem. It's all of us against the problem, not me against whoever screwed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the mark of good leadership, by the way. I will say there's plenty of bad leaders who love to cast blame. If you haven't been thrown out under the bus and then had it backed up over you a couple times, you haven't lived very long. But, you know, that isn't the way it is. That isn't the way it should be. So.
No, and I would say, when looking for a place to be, I want to be in a place that has that blameless culture. That when somebody throws somebody under the bus, everybody goes, I really don't want to work with that person anymore.
And Pasha here asks, at what point do you give yourself a break self-blaming? You don't self-blame. Self-blame, you do take responsibility. It's not about blame, though. It's not about feeling bad. It's not about feeling bad. It's about looking for what could be better.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's you still don't want to blame yourself either. It's really, you have to take ownership of it, but it's not about feeling.
They're hearing your phone vibrate.
Oh, they are. Oh.
They say they are. I don't know.
That might have been me turning the tone.
Yeah.
Anyways, you definitely. I think if you internalize those too much, you get into some serious problem in terms of, things went wrong, and sometimes they're outside of your control. But you still need to own and figure out what you can do to get things to move forward. I've had some of those where it was nobody's fault. It was an unplanned, unscheduled, random testing by users who all of a sudden, yeah, that's me. That was me nervously.
Oh, there we go. There, now I know what it is. We found the phone vibration.
We found the fault.
It's the wet glass. Nice.
But anyways, it's
no more sinful apple.
No more sinful apple. It's really good though. Really
it is.
Good.
Drink of the day is sinful apple. For those of you who joined, we have a bunch of traditions in the channel. One of them is the rant. We'll get to the question of the week. I missed it last time. We'll definitely get to it. And sinful apple. But let's keep going. What else would you say, if anything, about handle taking responsibility? We good?
I think so. I think we've got that one multiple times.
Yeah. Okay. So then next question is, what kind of people tend to be executive leaders by personality traits?
Doers, people who want to get things done, I think is at least one of the big personality traits. You said you want it. Like it's people who are, they take action. I think that's something that I see in every executive that I know. It's somebody who wants to take action. It's not passive people. It's not people who are allowing the world.
They can be cautious. They can be thoughtful. They can look for a lot of data. They can be very detail oriented. But it is people who are willing to make decisions and willing to act.
Yeah.
And there is a certain level of being willing to tell people, set direction for others, tell people what to do. I want to call out Sherlock Holmes here real quick on the last question. He said, at what point as a non-exec is it appropriate to take blame? One of my favorite examples, I mentioned earlier, under hardest decisions where we had to roll back the release of Amazon Video. What I loved about that was it turns out if, and we'll go back to personality traits in a second, of leaders. But what I loved about that situation, we released something prematurely. It turns out my boss, who was a VP at the time, I was a senior manager, he felt like he had made a mistake. He took blame because he committed us to release on a certain date in order to get a marketing opportunity. So he felt he was responsible for pushing the team to a certain date that they weren't ready for because of the marketing responsibility. I had advocated that we needed to do a beta, and we didn't do the beta. I've told this story before. You can go look it up. The company made a decision not to do a beta test. I felt like I was responsible and took responsibility because I didn't push harder for the beta. And then the tech leader on my team, like the senior engineer, felt responsible because he had missed the fundamental bug that made the product not work. So in answer to your question, I think if you can see where you could have done better and you could have, responsibility works best when everybody in the chain, from the person at the most hands on the keyboard, hands on the jackhammer, hands on the dynamite, whatever it is you do, hands on the scalpel, all the way up through the highest leader involved, looks at their part. Because usually mistakes and problems are not one person, they're several misses. So going back to this question of personality traits, most of the executive, we've done this DISC survey here before. We've talked about the DISC personality test. Most of the leaders I see in tech are Ds. And D is this decisive driver personality. You can look up the DISC taxonomy. However, I have seen leaders of every type. The I's are the influencers. The S are supportive. The C are conscientious. I've seen leaders of every type. That's thing number one. And thing number two, the D type has drawbacks. So the fact that our leaders, at least in tech, are often Ds leads to some of the so-called tech bro culture that isn't always great. And so if you haven't read the book, it's not on my book list, but I can at least talk about it. If you're an introvert, there's a book you should read called Quiet. Quiet basically talks about how our society moved about 100 years ago from thinking of a very reserved, thoughtful, long to listen, slow to speak person used to be thought of positively, like, oh, that person is very considerate, they're very reserved, they're very thoughtful, they're very scholarly. Now they're thought of as slow on the uptake, and we've moved towards the Dale Carnegie, hey, win friends, influence people, be quick. And society moved to the salesperson and the media personality as the winning leader from the sort of nobleman. And I'm not arguing one's better than the other. I'm just pointing out this book, Quiet, talks about that shift where we went more towards salesmanship and less towards sort of whatever you want to call it, scholarly thoughtfulness. Anything to add?
Well,
Personality types?
Well,
Or
just
books?
on that point, I guess
Yeah.
I would say that, we talked about even for myself, and you keep prompting not only because I'm your guest, but you know that I'm more of the supportive role. I am. I have not taken the DISC test, but I am decisive, but I am very clearly more in the support side. So it's very interesting when you get a room full of all decisive people. It's whoever the loudest, strongest, decisive person is who steamrolls everybody in the room. It's very common. It's difficult for somebody who's like, hey, let's work together to come up with the best idea and move that forward. No, this is the right way. This is the way. Anyway, no, copyrighted.
The question is there a place for that kind of leadership today as a follow-up question?
Yeah.
And somebody says that's a sign of a great team, win together, lose together.
I love that. I love that whole story.
You should absolutely, no I in team. Is there a place for that kind of leadership today? I think there is. I think very much there is. And there are cases of it. What is it? There's a story about, I think it's the San Jose Spurs is a basketball team that's all about team play and not stars. There's many cases where people can be quiet, thoughtful, listening leaders, but they have to be able to be disciplined enough or be able to interject and request the quiet. I do know of a leader at Amazon I worked with. She had a trick that was really interesting. When the room got louder, she just started whispering. And she got quieter and quieter. She would speak. She just lowered her voice. And she would make people were like, what are you saying? What? And she would just repeat it very quietly. And it caused everyone else to shut up so they could hear. Yeah, I'd rather be Darth Sidious than Yoda. Interesting. So there's no one personality type of a great leader. What there are people who have found out or figured out how to lead in their style.
Sure.
And it takes different ways to earn respect and to convey messages. But style is about interaction. So, okay, Liger, I'm not sure what a boiled cow hemorrhoid looks like.
Wow.
Maybe it looks like Darth Sidious.
Well, yeah, maybe. I think so.
All right, next question.
We've got that one.
What are the distinctions between Ethan and Dave's roles, technical versus non? Well, I can talk about this.
Yeah,
some,
go
but you
for
go.
it.
No, you go first. We're talking about.
I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I think that on the technical side, it is being able to go very deep tech and understanding. I mean, I do agree with you, though. I have seen...
Well, the first point, is we don't work at the same company anymore.
We don't work at the same company.
So our roles are different because I work at Amazon and he works at Discovery.
Absolutely. But I mean, I think you made a really good point. I have seen non-technical leaders lead technical teams because they ask the right questions and they are committed to learning and understanding. I think that classically, a technical executive needs to be able to just naturally go deeper with the team and to understand why you would organize a technology team one way or another. Like, you can organize them around product, you can organize them around services, and you need to understand what that does for the organization. Does it help the organization meet its goals? I think one of the key things is I've had to watch out for people who are very focused on technology for technology's sake. And I think at the executive level, it's got to be technology for the customers and the company's sake. So that's the big difference, is just that technical understanding and background. At least
definitely I rolled my eyes when you said technology for technology's sake, because so often people come to me and say, not often, but people will come to me or leaders of my team and say, well, I want to work on some new piece of technology.
Yeah.
My motive here is nothing to do with the customer or the business. It's I want to learn a new language, which is great, except not what you're here for.
Not what you're here for.
You know, I want to have an ice cream machine placed here on stage, but it's not the point. Not that it would be bad.
We'll try to hook you up.
We could dreamsicles next time. But no, the point is, in what are the key distinctions? So both Dave and I come from technical backgrounds. I am a tech VP at Amazon. However, my role is much more general business management. Dave is in almost a CTO role. So he's focused nearly exclusively on providing the technology solutions his business needs. I'm using technology to provide business solutions, and then also worrying about things like the P&L of the business directly, owning it. the marketing messages of the business, the PR plan, the product definition. So it's when you go into general management, you get the whole suite, the legality, the terms of service, the customer service, all of that different suite of information. Now, usually you have an executive team, and frankly, you play a role on that team. So Dave would play the technical advocacy role. But if you're on an executive team, you're thinking about all of these issues. And so to the point about the path to being an executive, if you want to be super narrow and only worry about design or only worry about law or only worry about tech or fill in the blank, executive leadership is probably not the right match because you inevitably get pulled into the full business. So now we have a question. It showed up in chat earlier. I hope that people are still watching. Do people still start at a company and work themselves up, or are executives always job jumpers?
I don't. Well, I would say for my first, we didn't talk about like how we got here, but my first executive role was with the same company. I worked my way up there. I think that I see more of that, and not as much of the job, like the jumping from job to job to get that level. Now, some people do that.
Yep, hired
some people
guns.
absolutely hired guns. But especially on the technical side, now I would say one of the challenges of that is you know where everything is, and it gets difficult to delegate things if your natural instinct is to jump in and solve a problem. So if you came up, and this may be even, some companies large enough that you can move from a team to a team, and it's a completely different organization. I'm mostly meaning if you grow up, if you're like your manager, senior manager, and your executive at the same company, you can sometimes get pulled into not delegating enough because you understand things too deeply. But that's not quite on the maybe this question. It's I see less job jumping. Maybe you do.
Well, I was going to answer this super succinctly and just say both. Some people work themselves up. Some people get hired in. It depends on circumstances. But I see plenty of people who work their way up. And I would say, I think I can share without talking about Amazon, that in Amazon we have seen, and Amazon's only one example, it's the one I'm familiar with, we see more people work the faster rate of progress is working yourselves up, not job jumping. But look, people change jobs. Like, it's only jumping if you're doing it very quickly. So, all right. We're going to take one more question here. Then we're going to do the question of the week because it's one of our traditions. And then we'll speed run the rest of the questions on our way to dinner. So, because that's going to be one of our new traditions. Okay. So how can you hone your decision-making skills? Well, it wouldn't be complete if I didn't cite my favorite book on this topic, my number one book recommendation of all time, the book Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath, is really excellent advice on how to make better decisions. However, you hone your decision-making skills by making decisions.
Yes. Right. And making mistakes.
My two favorite quotes on that, I know I've told them both to you. Experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. That's number one. And number two is a paraphrase of the same thing, which is good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from a lack of good judgment.
Yes.
Yeah. So what would you say on honing decision-making skills besides practice?
I would say both of those. I think there's very few places I can think of that allow you to make those decisions. It's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm sure there are some programs that do in terms of like formal education or other, but like again, I'll come back to my Army. We would practice making those decisions, not in combat. So you would make you would just practice the reflex of make a decision, go do something. And that was kind of the quick decision. It wasn't necessarily strategic. It was just start running that direction because something might land on you right now. Do something. And that actually helped exercise that muscle of the capability of making the decision. But I love Decisive. It's also, I've read that book and it's phenomenal. But
yeah, we haven't ever had anybody, this is a challenge to chat. if as Lagerbox says, stop, look around, make a call.
Yep.
That's from Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
But on Decisive, we've never had anybody read the book and come back and say, "Wow, that was a huge waste of time and money."
No.
However, besides making your own decisions, the other thing you can do is study the decisions of others. Look at the case studies. This is something they do a lot in MBA school. I don't have an MBA, but I've talked to enough MBAs they do case studies of someone made a decision. How did it work out? What were the pros and cons? And so you can watch the people around you who make decisions and frankly play armchair quarterback or Monday morning quarterback, whatever you want to call it, where you disassemble their decisions. And you can also go ask them, hey, you did this thing I don't understand. Why? By the way, that's one of the most interesting questions. We were talking earlier about how to engage an executive.
Yeah.
That question we like.
Oh,
I
God.
see you made this
Yeah.
decision. I don't understand why. Is great because we want you to understand. Believe it or not, we don't just want you to obey. We actually want you to understand. Lagerbox, cheers. Go save the world. Go cure the sick. And thank you for being here. Licorice, you've missed some. Uptime's not live on this chat bot. We have it on our other one. But the chat will tell you in a second here. But you can study the decisions made by others.
Yeah.
And that's a great way. It's this great sport called second guessing.
Oh. Well, that's the greatest military leaders I know were all about military history and studying everything in campaigns from before. It's just, if, that was...
Well, there's nothing new under the sun,
nothing new
right?
under the sun.
That's from the book of Ecclesiastes. And while I rarely recommend the Bible here as a book to read, if you want human wisdom, the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, human nature, the point there is not religious. Human nature hasn't changed in 4,000 years. And you can actually read the rules of human behavior probably in the religious texts of lots of religions, but certainly in the so-called books of wisdom, it's all back there of what people did. Existential wisdom. Yeah. All right. So we have a tradition we do in the middle of questions, which is we do the question of the week. And we've done this 24, except I missed it last week, 24 almost consecutive weeks. Question of the week is a complete topic change. We draw off Arthur Aaron's 36 questions that build relationship. And it's a way I've gotten to know many of the regulars in chat. And so what we do is I ask the question. I'll do that in a second. I'll let Dave answer it. And then people in chat answer it. So to chat, you have to follow. If you haven't followed for at least a minute, you won't be able to contribute. So we'd love you to follow. We'd love you also to join our YouTube, by the way. We're close to getting to 1,000 YouTube followers. And so we'd love that. But question of the week this week, they've gotten more personal as we go through. And at question 24, we're 2/3 of the way through the 36 questions. The question is the classic Freudian question. How do you feel about your relationship with your mother?
Sure. Yeah, this is, I know we've had...
T Weirdo's going to answer, I'm sure. Others will as well.
No, I was extremely close to my mother, and she was probably one of the main reasons I got into, I would say, leadership and technology. But she was, from what I can learn, an old soul when she was young. She grew up in high school. She was known as Ma Markley because everybody would go to her to answer their problems, to get advice on relationships and everything else. She won, and this is something I think is missing now. She won debate squad things across the state of Ohio. She won extemporaneous speaking awards, and I'm so glad I was able to say extemporaneous speaking.
We're scaring Duke of Thought off. This is some way too deep psycho analysis. We'll bring
anyways.
Dr. K in. No, it's good. You talk.
She was, it was just great to have a mother like that. Unfortunately, she passed a couple years ago. Cancer sucks, by the way, and if you're over 50, go get a colonoscopy. Got to plug it. Sorry, but it's like it's.
I've had that.
So have I. She, it was her who honestly got me into making sure I stayed on the humanities side. When I got into tech, I was big into tech, even in grade school and high school. But she was like, David, if you can't communicate to people, you're only going to get so far. I don't think she ever knew this executive things, but she was clear. Like, you'd be locked in a room. That was her worry, that I would be locked in a room and answering problems, but wouldn't be able to communicate what it was. So I was very close to my mom. Long answer. She was great, an amazing human being, and I'm really sad that she's not here.
Well, yeah, that's fantastic. And it turns out a lot of people in chat, at least those who are speaking up, had the same relationships. Because there's a lot of positive in chat. I had, my case answering, I always answer for chat. And I talked about this some on the stream I did with Dr. Kanagia, if you want more details. My mom was nice enough. She took care of us, but she was very demanding and never quite satisfied. So I've had some issues just where I've had to realize that my mom was the matron of the family, by the way. She was the strong personality. She passed away just this last summer at 93, so she lived a wonderful, long life. But she had a very hard time being accepting, and nothing was ever quite good enough for her. And that certainly drove me. To be very fair, it's probably why I'm an executive, because I worked very hard to earn respect. But it had some negative side effects, and I had to eventually decide to live for myself, not for family expectations, which I know for a lot of the people who are from around the world and family expectations are super strong, that can be a hard lesson, right? In the end, you certainly want to be a part of, you want to be a part of your family and try and take into consideration what they want, but in the end, you do have to judge yourself by yourself, not what other people, even your parents, tell you about you. If it's negative, you might want to listen for the value, but you can't let it bring you down. I'm glad all you folks love your mom, though. I loved my mom. She was just a very hard woman. So you can love someone and not like everything they have to say. Family expectations, that's right. They can be hell.
Yeah.
So that's how I get to know you guys. And Licorice, I see that you resonate with some of what I said. Look, it takes all types. The point of this is, as the community shares its inner truths, like someone else here saying, most amazing person in my life, we get to know each other and we become more of a community. And what I like here is having people who come back every week and who join our Discord and we talk, and so many of you have gotten better jobs, moved up in your careers, seem to be happier. And that's all from this little stream. It's awesome. So, main squad, love what you had to say. All right. So we'll answer a few more questions now. Dinner's almost ready, so we're going to go, and the drinks are empty.
Almost gone. Yeah.
So we're going to go into speedrun mode. And what we do is speedrun is I'll give my 30-second take on each question, and you can do the same. So the next question is, how important is being charismatic, likable, in attaining an executive role?
I'd love to say that it isn't, but it is. You need to be, I think you have to be likable. You have to be charismatic in some way. I personally think you do.
I agree.
It's not you have to be liked by everybody. You have to be comfortable by not be liked by everybody, but you have to be likable.
Well, that's interesting. There are some people who are feared or loathed, but they are,
it's still charismatic.
They are charismatic, though.
That's true.
There are tyrants who rule by fear, and they
Yeah.
somehow suck people in. I don't know how they do it, but if you looked at arguably the great dictators of history, whether Stalin or Hitler or Mussolini or Mao, oh boy, good thing Twitch doesn't go to China. They were super charismatic.
Yes.
Do you have to be charismatic? I think you have to have something that people relate to. And that's probably the key. Something they identify with and respect.
I agree with that. I think it's I think you have to be liked by somebody in most cases, like
Yeah.
at least the higher ups. Boy, if it'll take too long to answer that question. But I've heard of companies who are like, we need somebody who's just that tyrant. We're going to hire that tyrant to be the CTO. And it's like, and I'm using a nice word, but they hired that person and and everybody left. So,
Well, it depends on what result you want, right? You do not have to become a dictator to become an exec.
no.
What I'm saying is sometimes
Yeah.
there are people who manage to command respect or at least obedience without being likable. I don't think that's a good call. All right, we're going to go to the next question. I'll go first on this one.
Okay.
I haven't even read it yet. We'll just trade order. What advice would you give to an entry-level product person who wants to have more impact? Oh boy, I should have given you this one first. I would say get to know the details. The number one thing we see in product management is, even more simple, talk to customers.
Yeah.
Don't think you're going to think your way to brilliance. Don't go ask the customers, by the way, what do you like about this glass? Go ask them what problems they have with their glassware. Or you're trying to elicit what problems you have in this space that I can learn from. What are you struggling with technology, with executive leadership, with world peace, whatever your area is. Yeah. Become educated on the customer problems and then turn those into solutions. That's the advice I would give. You go.
Come with real data. Like I say, as a tech guy, if I'm going to build something, I want to know that it isn't just this is a great idea and I've been able to market and sell it to a bunch of other executives within the organization. Hey, I'm losing this. Honestly, it is really one of the biggest things that I have, and it's a pet peeve, is everybody can come up with a great idea, but to your point, talk to the customer, get actual data if you can, and bring that to me.
Well, we had this on Twitch Pitch. My next show is Twitch Pitch.
Absolutely.
We asked one of the people pitching. He was a great guy. We're doing Twitch Pitch. Devin and I will be back doing Twitch Pitch Tuesday, just 48 hours from now, even less. At 2 p.m. on Tuesday, we'll be doing Twitch Pitch, show number 2, hopefully with less glitches. We had someone on who was invested. They had invested months building a game aimed at streamers, and that streamer had never they had never talked to a single streamer about the game. They hadn't talked to a single streamer, and they're designing for them. So you take this one. What is the best way to demonstrate worth to an executive to prevent being outsourced for cheaper?
Thank you.
Oh, I can answer this if you can. I can totally.
Well, I'd love to get your answer. I mean, I honestly think it's provide value that is difficult to outsource. I mean,
be worth more.
Yeah, that's the key.
Be worth more. 3 words. We can talk about how, but you keep going.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's you've got it down to 3 words. I think you're right. You need to make sure that what you're doing is something that is not easily outsourced. And if it is something that is easily outsourced, you should, take on things that are not easily outsourced. Be worth more.
Be worth more, right? And there's tons of ways to increase your value. It's in lots of my other VODs. So this isn't really on executive leadership, so we're going to move on. But the demonstrate worth, the best way to demonstrate worth is to do hard, valuable work. It's to do worthy work. Good evening, gents. All right. Speaking of business tech interaction, what are the strategies or mechanisms to balance scope and speed required from business with quality and work-life balance needed in a high performance tech org? You first.
This is definitely one of the challenges I have faced before, and I know I'll face again. I think it's limiting the number of overall large programs that have a fixed, rigid date for no reason. You will have those, but what you need to do is have the ability on other programs, other projects, to take the changes in terms of scope and speed that is required. This is a really tough challenge for technology, but it's a combination of pushing back on product to make sure there are the things that they say we absolutely need. The worst thing I can receive from a product manager, I know that was the previous one, is everything's P0. There's nothing that we cannot ship with. And that is not a reasonable position for me to be able to go to my engineering team and say, everything's got to be done. Every single thing. Because as you get closer and closer to launch, as you said with your products, it's you start to decide, is it worth is this something the customer wants? Is it something that we can launch, and is it quality enough to put it out? If we try to cut too many corners, we make the customer unhappy at the end. So just diving into this, like what I try to do for the team is make sure we have very few projects that have a fixed hard date. And even when we do have one, the other projects get impacted, and I explain that impact to executive, to the senior leadership. Like, you want this by this date, these other things are going to slip. And that's part of my role.
Very good. I want to call out a few people in chat, and I'll answer. Denana, who just scrolled off the top of our view here, created all of our icons, all of our recent additions to chat emotes. So if you're a sub, Denana, who just joined, created the drink, the rant, and the question of the week. Second, Captain, by the way, I'm glad you got so much so quickly. Rockstar OG, yeah, you know, being an executive, you're saying it's weird how a college student has these skills. Being an executive, it's just really honing the skills and learning to apply them in a business context. Sadly, there is nothing magical about what I do. It's just I've practiced certain skills so that I do them better, faster, cheaper. To this point, this question that we're answering, which I'm going to answer really quickly because you gave a lot of depth. What are the strategies and mechanisms to balance choices and saying no? There's not enough saying no. People want to make everything a priority. They want to pound the table and have everything. I think work-life balance, or quote-unquote work-life harmony, comes from saying no. And people aren't good at it. We're going to move on.
I got to get used to this speed round. You know,
round?
On the other side of the camera, it's easy.
It's easy? You know. All right.
But by the way, one little thing. I've heard some people say that strategy is the ability to say no.
Well, and Steve Jobs was huge on saying no. Yeah. Like, you know, and lots of the great leaders. Steve Jobs specifically said, building a great product is as much about what you say no to as what you say yes to. As an executive, do you ever feel constrained about what you're able to talk about in public outside of work? Hell yes.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah. How many disclaimers have we given here about our views? There's so much you can't talk about. I would love to talk more about diversity on this stream, even though I disclaim that I don't speak for Twitch or Amazon. It's a dynamite thing. We never bring politics in. I certainly, like every human out there, I have political opinions, on and on and on. Anything you want to add to this?
No, absolutely. Not only in public, but even with your teams. As you said, people are watching you all the time. Just an offhand remark, you've got to be very self-aware in this role, in any role like this.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's just a lot of stuff. I couldn't believe this, but IBM in the 60s had a manual that said personal opinions are something best left at home. And when I first read that, like 20 years ago or something, I was like, what a bunch of jerks, like stifling. Sure. But there is some truth that, like, I have a team of 200. Any opinion I have, from a sports team to whether or not to drink or what I drink, it offends someone. And so sometimes it's easier not to say it. Let's move on. Yeah. That said, I don't stifle who I am. Like, no. I let, you know, but sure, I feel, the question was, do I feel constrained? For sure. What are your mechanisms and recurring meetings to understand the health of your organization? You want to give the 30-second answer to that?
30-second answer is I think we talked about this a lot. The rhythm of business is just looking at what meetings are taking place and why, and understanding what you need to have in terms of weekly updates, monthly updates, all those things to understand why we're having a meeting. I also prompt my organization to question every meeting that they have. If it doesn't have an agenda and it's not valuable to them, they should push back on it.
I agree. I want to call out a couple of the things in chat. The Bird Abide says time is finite and everything has a priority. That is completely true. It's just whether or not you're willing to recognize it. Similarly, not making a choice or deferring a choice is a type of choice. Hephaestus says it's hard to recognize your casual comments are taken very seriously by the people who report to you. See the earlier story about the gentleman who wanted to know what kind of car I drive. As a leader, everything you do and say is watched, and it's incredible how much you can offend. Like I mentioned reading the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible as a way to get human wisdom. And I made sure to say I wasn't talking about religion, because if I imply biblical religion here, there's some set of people that I'll put off. And that wasn't my point. So I wasn't trying to, but you get into all of that disclaiming. Yeah. All right. So my mechanism, we have something called a weekly business review. And so we look at the data of a business all the time. So ShinXZ, I'm going to answer this only because it's funny. Is there any chance of a more EU-friendly streams time-wise in the future? Yes. I will be on with Devin Nash at 2 p.m. Pacific Tuesday. So just 2 days from now, that's earlier. Second, I will be, I'm going to take a vacation in Italy this summer, and I plan to live stream from Italy on Italian time. So there will be EU live streams from good old Rome, assuming I can get the right connectivity. So I'm going to do more streaming in different time zones over time, but not all the time. There will be IRL streams coming up. Okay, so the mechanism, the weekly business review, though, we look at all the details of the business, how it's operating, what the customers were, what the revenue is, all kinds of different details of the business. So Earth has a coronavirus outbreak. That is true. It's on Earth. It will all be over by summer. We'll all either be very healthy, which is what I believe, or dead. Either way, coronavirus will be done by summer. Prediction. You heard it here first. You can replay it when it's going on through the summer. Moving back, next question. What advice would you give to someone older looking to make a career switch? You want that one?
That's a tough one. Because you don't know the situation. It's obviously make yourself valuable, but I think it's my best advice for anybody, older or not, is make sure you understand why you're making the switch. Run towards something or go towards something and not away from something. So yeah, I can't speak to this because I don't know what they're looking for, but make sure you're making a move for the right reasons. I've seen people jump for very small amounts of gain in terms of finance that it wasn't because of something that was motivating them. I'm not sure how best to answer that.
Yep. I got to take a pause. I realize I've been talking about Twitch Pitch like everyone knows what it is. And that's a terrible mistake. So Twitch Pitch is something fellow streamer Devin Nash and I concocted, where we created a show where you can bring anything you want on and pitch it. And we give you feedback on two things: how you pitched it, the actual delivery of the pitch, and the idea. And so the point is, as a business and life skill, you need to be good at pitching things. Yeah. It is valuable in sales. It is valuable in executive leadership. It is valuable to get a date. It is valuable to sell an idea. It is valuable. The audience likes that. It is valuable to plan a vacation with friends. It is valuable because you want to go out for Mexican tonight and the people you're with keep insisting on sushi. Oh. You need to be able to pitch. So we build a show around that. And if you want to submit an entry to be brought on the show and get that feedback, which we've done one and the people really valued the feedback, you can simply email a one-page summary of what you want to pitch and who you are, as well as how to contact you, to twitchpitch, all one word, at gmail.com. At 2 o'clock on Tuesday, Devin and I will have gone through whatever you send. By the way, one of the pitches supposedly coming on to give you the idea that it's going to be fun, somebody wants to pitch why Devin should cut his hair. And we told him that's a completely appropriate pitch. Now, we've had, of course, most people bring business ideas, and we critique those. We give feedback on both the pitch and the idea with the best of our expertise. But you can bring whatever pitch you want that is vaguely civil and polite and pitch whatever you'd like, and we'll give you feedback on it. It's a good, fun show. Devin and I tag team. This will be our second run at it. We had a great first show, and it'll be 2 o'clock on Tuesday, 2 o'clock Pacific time. We'd love it. All right.
On which channel?
The audience wants to know on which channel. We believe this time it will be both streamed on my channel here and on Devin's channel. So we will squad stream or duo stream, and both chats will be live. Both communities will be live. And so for the first time, we'll have 2 sets of mods, 2 sets of chat, and you can hang out or cross the streams any way you want. So we're going to co-stream it. And this is not about church, Essen. All right. Okay, sweet. What advice would I give to someone older looking to make a career switch? I would say know the cost and have a plan. You have to think through what is it you're going to do. And I would also say ask someone in the target career and then network like hell, because you're going to want to make that move smoothly. Like just quitting your job and taking a 4-year new degree in something you're not really sure you're going to like, you only think you're going to like. How do you test it? Read that book, Decisive, I talked about, and it talks about how to test something before you actually do it. So that's my quick advice on this. It's a great question for our Discord.
Yeah.
Moving on. Any suggestions for transitioning from a leader in a support function to a senior GM member of the C-suite? Broaden what your impact is. Support functions have trouble climbing up. It's usually line functions that make the money or that build the tech. If you want to come from a support function, you're going to have to show relevance to the larger business. What do you want to add to
No,
this?
absolutely. And learn how to delegate. Learn what you need to get done, and as much as you may have delegated in your previous role, it's when you're going to look for the key leaders that you can leverage to get things done that you need to, because you're going to have a much broader scope. You've got to find out and it may not be on your team. You find people on other teams that are just key stakeholders or people that you need to get. So I would say summary is what you said, plus find the right people to delegate to.
All right. Last question from our extension, which is, are the skills that make an executive successful the same skills that make an entrepreneur in their capacity as a leader? That is a great question. We might spend a couple extra minutes on it. Dave Markley first.
I would say yes. I think that somebody who has that desire to be an entrepreneur is often somebody who becomes an executive. I mean, we talked about that kind of at the early part of the show, but if you have that mind that wants to have a bigger impact or create a business in some way, you're already thinking about what you can do and what you can build in terms of a business, which is a large part of what I think executives are doing, is driving that in a larger organization. I might be missing things there.
No, I agree. The two are fairly related, and what I was thinking about is at Amazon, we often seek to hire entrepreneurs who have finished their business, sold it, shut it down, it failed. It can even have failed. We hire entrepreneurs as leaders, because the thing we like most about entrepreneurs as leaders and as executives is that they have been on the hook for final decisions that mattered.
Yeah.
They've had to make hard choices and face them, deal with customers, deal with cash flow, deal with revenue, deal with product questions. We love entrepreneurs and we want an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
Similarly, I would say it's the same skill set, right? An entrepreneur in their capacity as a leader has to inspire a team somehow. They don't have to be loud, but they have to inspire a team.
Oh, yeah.
And they have to be a general manager. most entrepreneurs learn on the job. Brand new entrepreneurs classically struggle a lot and find a lot of blind spots and screw up a lot of things. And so it's another quote I heard internal to Amazon. We say they are well covered in scar tissue because you learn the most. We haven't talked about this recently, but you learn the most from painful failures.
That is I would say that's the hardest thing. You can't accelerate scar tissue in a lot of ways. I guess I'm not saying it right, but it's very hard to learn lessons without having lived through those challenges. And we do get a lot of people who've had those over time.
Okay. A couple comments here in chat. DigiKing says, coming from finance, I would say no. Often the type of people that do well starting a business from scratch are not good candidates to run or maintain a large org. It's definitely true. Entrepreneurs struggle with rigid hierarchy.
True.
Once you've been the boss that founded it and you can make any change so that you live or die, it is very difficult if you're in a company that does not change rapidly or is heavily regulated. Entrepreneurs struggle with bureaucracy. They really don't like bureaucratic situations because they're not used to them. And because they may find them to be antipathy, right? Like just horrible. So that is a difference. Yeah. The question, though, was what about the skills? And I think the skills are similar. Pentaquant says he asks this question because as a VC, so you should come to Twitch Pitch, by the way. Maybe you'll find a great idea or someone to back. But I see a lot of Seattle area execs start a company with little to moderate success or good ideas. So interestingly, do they start a successful company? However, I would say every entrepreneurial situation I've ever seen was a pivot where people started with an idea or a vision. It didn't work, and they adapted to something that did work. We're on Twitch. Twitch is an example of this. It started as Justin TV, and as Justin TV, it rolled over. That didn't work. It was struggling as a business. But they saw, oh, look, there's all this gaming happening on Justin TV. That seems to be working. We should rebrand. They became Twitch TV, focused on gaming and game streaming, and became a huge business. So I would say startups who pivot, someone says here they're 60% more successful. I don't know where that data comes from. He says, according to Startup Genome Report, but I believe that most companies pivot.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So with that, and Pentaquant clearly thinks iteration is important. Which I also agree with.
But I can't think of any
startup that didn't pivot at some level.
Way.
Yeah.
You have to.
All right, we're going to go eat dinner. We really appreciate everyone being here. We hope you learned a lot. I want to thank my producer and guest, awesome Dave Markley. This is also his studio where we've had a live studio audience. My next two shows, Twitch Pitch with Devin, 2 p.m. on Tuesday. And then a week after that, on Thursday, March 5th, Devin and I are going to have a surprise co-stream that we'll come back with and tell you more about later. So with that, thank you all for being here. I appreciate the support of the channel, all the regulars, all the subscribers, the people who enjoy our newly made emotes. It's good to see everyone here. I recognize most of the names in chat as either regulars or people I know. And so it's wonderful to see you here.
It's been fun to be on this side of the camera. Thank
all
you,
right.
guys.
Get back in your hole,
Get back in my hole now. Thank you, guys.
Cheers. We're out.